Hey, what is up? My name is Matt Workman, and in this video, we're going to hop back into Unreal Engine 5 with the Cine Designer assets, and we're going to look at how to launch the custom UIs and how to assemble and bring out our own lights, and generally look at how you're supposed to make them kind of interact with each other, like attach lights to stands, that sort of stuff. Couple little details we need to get straight before we can start flying and making really big lighting setups, so let's hop right into Unreal Engine. So here we are back in Unreal Engine 5. We're in our duplicated green screen stage map. In case we mess this one up, we can just duplicate the original, that sort of thing. And today we're going to be bringing in our own lights. So before we can do that, we need to launch some kind of helper UIs that I have written. If you've never seen this before, this is the Place Actors UI here. You get to it through Windows, Place Actors. And it's a really helpful thing if you're an Unreal Engine developer or visual effects artist that's going to use these kind of stock objects. You, as a Cine designer, artist, and user, and live action filmmaker who maybe is a little bit new to Unreal Engine, you won't really ever need to mess with this stuff. Feel free. It's really good to learn what this stuff does, but you don't generally need this stuff in here. We kind of have our own versions of a lot of these things. You will need the cinema camera. We do need the Cine camera actor. That's what's in our scene right now. We will eventually have our own cameras. But what we want to do is go to Content Browser, and we're in Cine Designer, and we're going to go to Blueprints. We're going to go to Widgets. Widget's a funny word. We're going to right-click the Cine Designer Editor Utility widget. We're going to right-click and run the Place Equipment widget as well. So if we come back to our map now, okay, mine are docked kind of funny. I'm going to undock these. I'm going to undock these two. Yours are going to look something like this. They're just going to be floating out here in the wild, most likely. And you're going to drag them in here. Again, this one's probably floating somewhere like this. Oh no. And we're going to drag this one to the bottom like that. This is my recommended setup for it. You can set it up however you like. So you'll see here I have a Place Equipment UI that I've designed to look kind of similar. They do behave differently, but the idea was to make it look similar. And here is where we're going to get our list of film equipment. The first tab, we have some stands and some lights. Then the next one, we have grip equipment. And in the final third tab here, we have what I'm calling overhead lights. So if you're watching this anywhere near release, there's not a lot of film equipment in this, and that's by design because this is the first version of this. Unreal Engine 5, still relatively new. I am still very, very actively learning how to design this type of system within Lumen 5.1. Lumen keeps changing as well. It's this ever-evolving process. It probably always will be. And the second reason, if we're on number 2 here, is that this will be the first version that got approved by the Unreal Engine Marketplace, and they have their own set of rules and compliance things that I need to sort out. Before I can make like 100 lights, we need to make sure that we have like the foundation down. So that's kind of why this early version looks very minimal. This UI only has 3 buttons. It's very early, but the plan is to keep updating it. So don't be too afraid if you're coming from the other ecosystems I had or produce that have tons and tons of stuff. The same thing is gonna happen here. That would be the goal anyway. So let's start by deleting some of these lights. I'm going to delete the softbox over here, the frame. And this light is made up of 3 pieces, which we're going to look at why that is and how that works in a second. And I'm going to leave the space lights on because otherwise it gets really dark, but I will turn those 3 off. So it's a little darker now. And we're going to float back here. If you're wondering how I move the camera so smoothly in the editor, I am using a space mouse, which I'll be definitely making a video about. I really enjoy this thing quite a bit. But what we're going to do now is spawn some film equipment using this menu. Now, if you're used to this one, the way this works is you click and drag an actor out like this. We don't do that. It's not going to work that way here. If I can figure out how to program that, I'll consider it. If you come from Unreal Engine already, you might be saying to yourself, hey, I'd like to control space, go in here, and where are all the assets? You can do it this way, but there are some limitations, and it's a little confusing. If you want to go about it this way, though, they are in Blueprints, equipment, and they're all organized into these folders. However, it may not be clear which one you're supposed to use. Like in this case, there's a light stand combo double, light stand combo low. It is these two, so if you wanted to drag them out this way, that will work. However, you wouldn't want to use this one. This is the base class. This is stuff you don't need to know about. My point is that for, I think, the average filmmaker, DP, director who's coming in to maybe use Unreal Engine to use this specifically, you don't need to do anything in these folders. There's a lot of folders. You don't really need to bother yourself with that other than launching the two UIs. The way that I have designed getting film equipment into the scene is like this. This is our grip truck for now. I know it's a very impressive model of a grip truck. And what's going to happen is that when we click on one of these objects over here, it's going to spawn at this little blue arrow. So let me demonstrate that. We're going to click on our light stand. We'll click it again. Another one shows up. Another one. We're going to add a different type of light stand. Then we're going to add some lights. And then we're going to add some more lights. And these will just keep spawning out in this grid. I personally think that this is pretty nice. I like things to be organized. And hopefully this looks a little bit like when you're doing layouts on set and you need to kind of like lay out the equipment. Now, if you don't come from on set in the grip and lighting department, that might mean absolutely nothing to you. But this has some parallels with the real world, and it makes me happy that it does this. One of the odd things, though, is that if you start moving these around and then you make another stand come out, it's not keeping track. It's not that smart of a system, but it will just try to make the initial, let's lay a bunch of equipment onto the ground and look at it. It should make that like a little bit nicer than dragging it out of the content browser or having them all spawn on the same place. So we're going to click our equipment and it's going to spawn out of our truck, and it's going to try to keep it neat, but it might kind of mess it up. All this equipment, again, is over here in the outliner, and it would be nice if you're an organized person to put them in folders, give them names, because the names are kind of wild coming out of the gate, but that is generally the workflow, and it's a little different than possibly any other thing I've ever used in Unreal Engine. If you move the truck now, whenever you move it, the lights are going to start spawning again at the blue arrow. If you delete the truck, it's all over. You have to uninstall. Just kidding. You can click this again and it's going to say, oh, you don't have a warehouse actor, and it's going to spawn one for you, and then you can start spawning your equipment again. So if you kind of have a place you know you want to stage your equipment, you can drag this truck to it, and it's going to try to spawn it in a nice organized grid. So I'm going to come over here and start deleting some of these out of here to make things a little bit simpler. So how do we get this light onto this stand? We have a very special button for this, and it's in the Cine Designer UI right here. We're going to select the light, we're going to select the stand, and we're going to click this button, attach light to stand, and boom, magic, it is attached. That is a very important concept. If you look over here, we have our light stand, we have our light, and when they're in this kind of like hierarchy like this, it means that they are attached. This is attached to this. The light is attached to the light stand. You can't actually use the native attach function in Unreal Engine, which would be like clicking and dragging it on top of it. For Cine Designer assets, these two specifically, you have to attach this way. There's some coding going on behind the scenes. It's not a native, just raw attach. So that's kind of important to know. To detach it, you can click this button with the light selected, and it's going to put it on the ground in front of it. So that's an important concept to get down in the beginning. Mostly for these lights and these two light stands, that's how that's going to work. However, that's how it's going to work when you attach pretty much any light that's like this, that has a yoke, to the grid, to boom arms, things that are coming in the future. You're going to need to use this attach button. It's very important in this initial setup phase. So next up, we're going to look at this light and say, it's not giving out any light. It's putting out 0 light at the moment. It's bouncing light, technically, from Lumen. And if we look at the options down here, all this thing does is pan and tilt. So that's not very fun, or it's a little bit of fun, but like, you know, we're here to light stuff. How do we get this thing to put out light? So we have a stand, and then we have our light. What we need to do is click this next button down here called Modifiers. This is our modifier gallery. And now we can choose between a couple options. We have a diffusion panel, a soft bank, and a lantern. And each one of these does different things. Maybe that's obvious. There are different types of lights. There's different types of stuff happening to try to make them look nice in Unreal Engine 5, specifically on metahumans as well. And what you need to do is, I'm going to switch back to the SoftBank. What you need to do to change the light that's actually coming out of it is select the modifier. And if we look down here, like in the first video, we have controls for this light where we can change its color. We can turn it off and on. We can make it brighter, darker. We can take off the control grid, and we have options for the light. So it's a little bit complicated, maybe, in the beginning to look at this system. But because the film industry is, especially the grip and line department, is very modular, like you can put lots of lights on lots of stands, and then you can put lots of modifiers specific to that light onto the light. I tried to make a system where I'm going to be able to have a large library of assets that can all interact with each other. So it's a little bit party. There's a lot of parts to it, more than I would really want, but this is, I still think, the best way I could get this out there. So let's look at some of the parameters of this light. We're going to drag this on set over here, and I'm going to space mouse my way over here. I like this space mouse a lot. It's like, it makes the editor a video game. And usually, like, we're in the editor to make video games. At least I am. Now the editor's a video game with the space mouse. I like it quite a bit. So we have our light. It's actually putting out light, but, there's some work we could do to this scene. We're going to select the light stand now, and we're going to click 1 or type 1. And 1 for this light stand is its max height. Now, these things are not 100% to scale with their IRL versions, but they are very close. Most of these, although I won't really be writing the brand names on there because that's not really allowed unless I did licensing or something like that, it should be fairly obvious what they are if you come from being on set. I'm going to try to make it very obvious which lights they're supposed to be, but, maybe there'll have to be some sort of like user database lookup of like what the real versions are, because there's going to be some kind of fringe stuff out there too. Anyway, this light stand's pretty accurate for a 2-tier combo stand. Let's set this to 0.5, set it to 0.8, and that is a good height. Next, we're going to look at the light itself. Again, this is really only responsible for its tilting, its panning. That's a little bit far down. -30, -25, something like that. It's looking pretty decent. Let's take a little float around to the front. And I don't know if anyone else aims lights like this. This is me for my gaffer training, is to kind of look over the shoulder of the talent here. And now when we select this is going to be the actual light source. And I think I've shown this already, but the lighting grid is actually functioning. We can turn it off, and you'll see that the light just goes like absolutely everywhere. This is probably fine for most cases. But I like having it in. We're going to slightly keep it more boxed in. And as far as exposure, this mannequin is completely white and shiny, so good luck keeping him not overexposed. But again, we can change our brightness here and change our colors. Let's go back to 50. It's amazing. We're gonna bring it up, bring it back down. It's just like real life. So that is setting up a light. It is a little bit of work here. There's the light, the stand, the modifiers, and a couple nuances I want to point out right out of the gate. Hopefully most people watch this. Completely cool if not. When you are moving this structure here, this like tree of objects, you want to only select the light stand, which if you look at it here is the root or the parent, the highest parent. That is the correct way to move this around. If you select all three and move them, it kind of breaks. I haven't figured out how to lock them yet. It might be possible to not have that be in the future. We will see. Also, if you grab them one at a time, you can move them, but then they're not going to be in the right place. So it's a little fragile. And if you're not used to Unreal Engine and dealing with like this kind of like setup here, that might be kind of weird. The other thing that I'm still working on, I'm going to go back here on the UI, is that if you select all three of these, you might think you can copy and paste them, and you can, but what's going to happen is that they're not going to be attached together properly. That is something else that I'm trying to work out a workflow to make that easier. So unfortunately, when we have all three of these, the light stand, the light, and the modifier, we can't copy and paste them. You have to go spawn them out and make them one by one. So that's kind of slow, but that being said, generally for performance, you can't have like 30 of these lights anyway. Lights like the space lights and certain lights, you can have as many as you want and you can copy and paste them. So we'll get to that probably in the next video actually. But I want to get this down in the beginning. The light stand, the light, the modifier, that's like a big core of the system. There's a couple limitations and those are some of them that I found so far. There's probably more. In the comments below, please, if you are an early user of this and kind of testing it in this early phase, all feedback is certainly welcome. In a couple of years from now, maybe not so much, but in the early phase, we want to find all of the little issues as fast as we can while we're in like basically like rapid development. The last thing I want to show here is another object that goes along with our kind of like small lights, I would say, pretty well. We're going to take a C-stand. So again, if you move the truck, it's going to kind of reset it because otherwise it will still have like kind of the memory of the old stuff that was there, or you could delete it, either one. Going to click a C-stand, click a C-stand. We actually don't need two of them, do we? We're just going to use one because these luckily can be duplicated. These can't, but these two, anything in here, you can copy and paste them. So that's pretty nice. We actually don't have to spawn that many of them. So I guess this looks pretty nice right here. We can look at this here. Again, if you're seeing a ton of options, you can just get rid of that. And I heavily recommend being in general for Cine Designer assets. As this spawns right now, it's in floor mode. It has stand mode, which the legs close. And, well, this is for when I'm going to put it onto a C-stand cart or a grip truck on a wall or something like that. That's going to happen. Floor mode is if it's just like there's a bunch of C-stands on the floor. They all sit like this usually, and they kind of stack together. But most likely, we're interested in being in flag mode. So now the gobo arm is popped out, and we're going to try to use it to go flag that light down there. That one right there. So we have our flag types here. We have a solid 24 by 72. Is this the meat axe? I just call them meat axes. We're going to have more flags in the future, but we want to get this first prototype out there and in people's hands being tested. We have a floppy that's sideways, but we will look at how to get it in the right place. And we have a 4 foot muslin. I don't know why I called it a muslin. It was supposed to kind of be a beadboard, but it's a positive bounce. Let's call it that for now. If we switch back to our to our meat axe here, we can then go to our grip arm configuration. We have topper, bottomer, table, and upright, which if we look at it from this side, that is designed, I mean, you could use this like this, but that's designed for the floppy here if you're trying to make a wall of negative fill or cut light or whatever you want to do with the floppy. And then we can do 0.5, we can do 1. That's a little unsafe feeling right there. Something like that feels relatively safe. I know there's no sandbags on this stand right now, but it's not going to fall over. That is generally how the C-stand object works. And what I would like to go do is add a topper to my key light back there. Now we're on a green screen, so it doesn't like really matter all that much, but as we're going to see in future demos, future tutorials, the lighting in Unreal Engine 5 bounces everywhere, very much like it does in the real world. And now the grip equipment in 3D matters an awful lot, because if you're letting stray light bounce around, it doesn't look very good if you're going for some controlled lighting setups. We're going to get an autosave. Cool. I'm going to spin this around here, and we can see it. Look at this lovely shadow. Now, there are multiple types of shadow technologies we can use in Unreal Engine 5. This currently is in Lumen, software ray tracing, and the virtual shadows beta at the moment. There's other types, and we're going to be looking at those, but this is like your stock. I made a new Unreal Engine project, and I changed nothing. That's what we're currently using, and works pretty well, I think. We're going to go up, probably all the way to the top, maybe not, 0.9, 0.8, not bad. And we have a bit of a topper here. Now, we don't see this doing a ton on this gigantic green screen. The cut is probably kind of soft. Let's see if we can actually see it in action. Okay, it's very subtle here, but it is actually cutting light, and there's definitely scenarios where you would want to cut the light off the back wall with a topper here. I'm gonna Control-C, Control-V, copy-paste, just like every other program in the world, and we're gonna switch it to bottomer. That's not a bad cut, to be honest. It's like cutting off the light on the floor. I'm just gonna make it like a little bit lower. Oh no, we're gonna come back up. Never mind that. 0.6, 0.7. Hey, it's not bad. So this is really more for illustration than like this is like the best, that this is like even an okay lighting setup at all. But we can see that we're able to box in the light, and in smaller scenes, not gigantic cyc walls, this will make a pretty big difference, like when we're doing interview sets and stuff like that. And I will be sure to make examples of that. While we're here gripping stuff, I felt compelled to add sliders to this. So I'm going to copy and paste this again. Pull it here. We're going to switch to our floppy, and let's go to our upright mode, and we have a lovely slider for this object. For this light here, put on the side. I can't tell depth-wise if we're like, the flags are clipping through each other. I'll look in a second. Gonna copy and paste this one again here. Grab the right axis, and there it is. We have sided this softbox. Feels maybe a little bit close, something like this. And we have made a C-stand jungle with grip equipment to box in our key light. This is pretty common. And especially for small lights like this, we have bigger grip equipment for our bigger lights, our bounces and whatnot. And hopefully this shows the idea with this system here of making a light, putting it on a stand, getting a modifier, setting up the settings, and then we get a pretty realistic and nice looking result here. All of our grip work is a bit for nothing once we turn these back on, but just for the sake of example and showing how the system functions, we box in our key light, but there are many scenes where we're going to need to do that to get the correct lighting from it. Cool, so that wraps it up for this video. We looked at how to launch the UIs, how to bring out a light stand, a light, a modifier, how to put them together, generally how they work, some kind of like caveats about you can't really copy and paste them, and there's some other kind of funny stuff that happens, you know, the system is still early. And then we bust out a bunch of C-stands and some flags, and it's like we're on set. This is really fun for me. Unreal Engine 5 with Lumen, now that it's in the state that it's in, is just incredible. If you've not worked in any other 3D programs, this is really fast. That's kind of like the amazing part. It was possible to get this type of like fidelity and shadows and bounce and just like general light quality in other programs in the past. However, it used to be pretty common to be like, oh cool, one frame, just a single frame, to see it like nice like this would take like 5 minutes, 10 minutes or longer. People who use Cine Designer in Cinema 4D that I made, you would know that it could take even longer. It's very painful, very slow. This is some like amazing jump in technology. So to be building Cine Designer in this ecosystem and just starting to use it myself, I've only used it for a couple of months at this point, is pretty awesome. And I'm very excited to see how far we can push this, like how many lights we can have. We can have a lot. It's crazy. How big a set can we make, and just how good it looks. Next video, we're going to switch to metahumans. It's going to look even better. This has looked fine, but once we put a metahuman in it and the sets get a little bit more realistic, this stuff starts to really sing. But in the beginning, I wanted to keep it very basic. Not everyone may have a metahuman yet. They're kind of overwhelming. Maybe the first time you use them, keeping it nice and slow. But next time, foot on the gas, we're going metahumans, and we're going to turn up the lighting quality even further. So I will see you on the next video.